pleasure to welcome Temple Grandin to the centre here today and to our Bishop Autism Greenhouse School. It is such an enormous privilege. We've had so many people coming here. We've had pop stars, we've had politicians, but I don't think we've ever had a great Grandin. So it's an enormous pleasure. And it's part of our strategy to actually have lots of people coming because we want to give them the opportunity to see this work, but also to learn from them. We've already learned so much today about all of the issues that she's written about and talked about. But the most important thing we learn, I think, from Temple, she reminds us, is that we have so much more to learn, and we have to remain curious. We have to remain committed to learning about autism, supporting people with autism. We also have to remain committed to always listening to people who have autism, who can tell us more than anybody else about these issues. So I'm going to actually speak very little and actually hand over to Temple to speak, and then we're going to have some questions and answers.
Well, it's great to be here, and I think I'll start out and just tell a little bit about myself. When I was 2.5 years old, I had all full-blown symptoms of autism, no language, no eye contact, constantly sit and rock, and I got really good early intervention. By the time I was 2.5 years old, I was in really good speech therapy, did a lot of ABA type of stuff with me. And another thing that was done was lots of turn-taking games. You gotta teach these kids how to take turns. And that was done with board games with me. Now, when people talked really fast, I didn't understand what they said because I had problems with hearing hard consonant sounds. So my speech teacher would slow down and she'd say like cup. She'd enunciate those hard consonants. Another thing that's often neglected in autism is sensory problems, like loud sounds like a school bell. That hurt my ears like a dentist drill. There's other children that are visually sensitive. They can't tolerate fluorescent lights. Now, they were not a problem for me. Sensory issues are extremely, extremely variable. And there's one area where I'd really like to see research done, and that's on the treatment of sensory issues, because they can make it just impossible to tolerate normal environments. You know, like going on the tube, or a football game, or a restaurant with a lot of TVs going on at once. We need to be definitely working on sensory. And it's difficult to research because it's variable. Now, one kid's got visual sensitivity problems with fluorescent lights, another one doesn't. Now, on the higher end of the spectrum, there's kind of different kinds of minds. I'm a photorealistic visual thinker. And the HBO movie shows exactly how my mind works. And you can play the American DVD here. You can buy it on Amazon in the US, but you'll have to set a computer for region 1, and then it will play. And if you don't know how to do that, get the... I saw a store downtown that unlocks cell phones, or mobile phones. They can certainly show you how to do that. And then the US DVD will play. They did a great job with the movie. They showed the sensory stuff accurately. They showed all the projects that I built accurately. And also anxiety in a real accurate manner. And I'm a photorealistic visual thinker. And all the images in the movie flashed up as a series of images. Couldn't do algebra at all. And I'm finding a lot of kids that can't do algebra, but they can do geometry and trig. Then there's another kind of mind. It's the pattern thinker. These are your engineers and mathematicians, you know, think chess, origami. These kids often have trouble with reading. And then you've got the kid that's the word thinker, where they know all the facts about their favorite whatever. They like to major in history, and they're definitely not a visual thinker. Now, I think one of the things at home that I've really been pushing is working on learning job skills. And I was very pleased when I visited the school. We went in, and the students were making brownies, and they were making brownies from scratch, and they're really, really yummy too. And doing a real task in a real kitchen with real food, because that's the only way that they're going to learn how to do things in life. And when I was 13 years old, my mother had me do a little sewing job for a seamstress. And when I was 15, I took care of 9 horses. We need to be thinking a lot more about what's the person going to do when they grow up. You know, some of the individuals that go to college, they need to be getting work skills. I think just a little bit that I've seen here in the UK, I think you're doing a little better job on the work skills stuff. We need to be thinking, kids are like 12 and 13 years old, what can they do when they grow up? Now my mother always encouraged my art skill, and that showed up around, 8 years old. And my art skill is what I used in my design business. You got to develop strengths. You got to build up areas of strength. I think what I'll do now is I think it'd be a good idea just to do a whole bunch of questions. I'm going to sit down so my back's kind of bothering me. And just sit down and do a whole lot of questions. If nobody has a question, I'm going to pick something. Somebody better have a question. Well, we're going to have to pick somebody here. Okay.
We saw the HBO film last night, actually watched it in the building, which is amazing.
No, they did a great job with that, and the DVD's got a really nice commentary track, and it also has subtitles in French and Spanish, which would be useful for some people. And I talk a lot about autism on the commentary track, and the movie is clinically accurate. That was one of the things we were very careful about, because Emily Gerson Sains, the producer, is the mother of an autistic child, and she runs an acting agency in New York. She wanted that to be right.
It's really interesting to hear you say that, because I was interested to know what involvement you had in the creation of the film, and particularly with Claire Danes' portrayal of your.
Well, I spent half a day with Claire Danes, and they videotaped that, and then I gave her all the oldest VHS tapes I could find so that she could get about 10 hours of my audio and my mannerisms. And then I spent a lot of time with Emily Gerson Sains and with Mick Jackson, the director. It took a while to get the whole thing together, because you had to get the right team of people. And it took 10 years to get the movie put together, because it took that long to find the right team. Mick Jackson, Emily Gerson Sains, and then Christopher Munger, the writer. You've got to have the right people that understand how to deal with the story. Mick is an extreme visual thinker. And I just loved how they did all the visuals, and that really turned me on. Okay, I'm going to pick something. Okay, right there.
Hello.
Yeah?
When you talked about some of the different types of learners, that
Yes.
my child is quite severely autistic, so I don't really know what category he would fit into in something like that, in that list.
Basically, they tend to either be visual learners or they tend to be auditory learners. If a child has a lot of problems with the visual system, that's nice fading in and out. But if a child has a lot of problems with the visual system, the ones that don't like the fluorescent lights and those sort of things, they tend to be auditory learners, where hearing will be their best sense. And then there's other kids where vision is going to be their best sense for learning things. It is variable.
Hello. You mentioned earlier about the sounds that could be too loud.
Yes.
Could you give more of an explanation on that and how you dealt with it?
Well, when the school bell went off, it was like a dentist drill hitting a nerve. That was just terrible. One of the ways to help with these sounds is to let the child initiate the sound. The sound is better tolerated if the child turns it on. Okay, fire the smoke alarm. That is one of the big bad ones. One of the ways that you could reduce that would be to get a smoke alarm and wrap it all up in towels so that muffles it, and then let the child turn it on briefly. And then gradually takes towels off, where he's got control. Another big problem with sound sensitivity is the supermarket or a tube station or something like that. They just go into sensory overload. It's like a dentist drill hitting a nerve. Be like just jackhammer, right next to your head, sort of thing. So you arrange a signal. So when he's had enough supermarket, you can take him out before he has a tantrum. So you go in the supermarket, and when he's had enough, you can give a signal to come out. Also, he'll be better able to tolerate that noisy place when he's fresh and not tired. When he's tired, problems with all the sensitivity stuff gets worse. I don't think it's Mike's here. Can you hear me without it?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to use it fading in and out. That's what I was confused.
Well, it is sometimes said that autistic people are very poor mind readers, but you seem to be a terrific animal reader, animal mind reader. How is that?
Well, an animal is not a verbal thinker. It's a sensory-based thing. And so it seemed to me sensible to look in the braces to see what the cattle were seeing. And when I started doing that back in the 70s, people thought that was just really crazy, to see what cattle were seeing. Now, social things, I got to learn about it like being in a play. I didn't know until I was 50 that people had all these little secret items. But that's something that you can be taught. But I've got to learn it like being in a play. Just got to be coached on how to do social things. Maybe somebody has a question out here. I don't want to ignore this group out here. Yeah, okay, right there.
Do you embrace being sort of autism celebrity? Or?
Well, I gets into my whole sense of identity. I get asked all the time if I could snap my fingers and be not autistic, would I do that? No, I wouldn't, because I like the logical way I think. But I consider myself a college professor in animal science first, and autism second. It bothers me very much that when I'm going to a meeting and a 10-year-old comes up to me, and all he wants to do is talk to me about his autism. I'd rather have him talk to me about a science project than talk to me about dinosaurs or some other thing that he's interested in. Because one of the ways on the higher end of the spectrum to be successful is to take something you're fixated on and turn it into a career. If I got fixated on autism, I wouldn't have developed a career in livestock. Another big thing that motivated me when I was in my early 20s is I wanted to prove people I wasn't stupid. And that motivated me to work really, really hard on my livestock. I didn't learn my livestock stuff overnight. Just to learn how to do the drawings, that was 3 years of hard work. I went to every feed yard in Arizona and I handled cattle to see how they worked in different places. Because autistic thinking is what's called bottom-up thinking. You know, the normal person thinks top-down. I'm bottom-up. To learn a concept, I have to learn it by specific examples. So how do I know what a dog is from a cat? Well, you get a whole bunch of pictures of dogs, and they go in the dog category, and the cats go in the cat category. And then I look at them, and I go, well, there's certain features that dogs have that cats don't have, like the shape of the nose. Let's take something more abstract, like teaching privacy. Okay, we go into the toilet, you have to shut the door, then you explain you've got to shut the door in the toilet. You don't scream at them, no, or something like that. You just say, when you go in the toilet, you close the door. Or he wants to take his pants off the tube station, you just explain that you only do that at home, private in your room. And you just kind of explain what the social rule is. It's specific to general. Everything is learned by specific example. You want to teach words like up and down, you need to teach them with many examples. You go up the stairs, a plane goes up in the air. You lift up a cup. You go up in the attic, a kite's up in the air. So you need to use several different examples like that to get the concept of up. Because if I just did it with up the stairs, you think up only applies to up the stairs. Yep.
Do you think you ever recovered from autism?
Well, I'm still autistic. I've had a zillion research brain scans done. And I just had my language output circuit scanned with a very fancy scanner that was developed for the Army for head injuries, where it can actually get down to autopsy level of looking at circuits. And there's a big circuit in the brain that's a language output circuit. And it's supposed to be a 4-lane highway. I've only got 1 lane. And then the other 3 on-ramps I grew into the wrong places, like the motor cortex. And that fits in with the fact that I had trouble getting speech out. I had problems with speech out. I was not that Nicolaitic kid that yacked out, TV commercials. You keep learning, where you adapt better and better and better and better. People tell me my talks are better at age 60 than they were at age 50. You keep learning. The basic biological problem, I have multitasking, I can't multitask. I have problems with sequencing. I still have those problems. And one of the things, well, I got asked how do I keep my schedule on these big paper calendars where I can see the entire month and then I write the appointments in on that. And I can see the whole thing all together. It's not sequential. Okay, I'm not very talking to group. I have to write down excellent people.
It's fantastic to have you here. I'm just curious, I know you had a tour around and you mentioned you liked seeing what was happening in the kitchen.
Yes,
can you give us some other thoughts of your observations coming to Treehouse School? And
Well, you've got a very nice school. One thing I was struck with is how calm everybody was. You go into a lot of schools and the building is damaged because you have a lot of behavior problems. You're doing something right here because that's not happening. And one thing is that's a lot of one-on-one contact. You're not making them do stupid things. Like one teenager, he had a big fit and he busted up a classroom because I made him set and unset the table like 10 times in a row. Nobody does that. You set the table, you eat the meal, and then you clean it up. He knows that's stupid. And then you label him oppositional defiant after you make him do something that's stupid. One of the things that I'm a big believer in turn-taking games. You might, especially these little kids, do some board games. Because a lot of these kids are bad about taking turns. And I learned that with the Parcheesi board, because when I was a child, there were no little children's games. They didn't exist. But you've got to take turns. Maybe do something on a computer where they've got to take turns using the map set. Learn how to take turns with things.
Our son loves pictures and maps, so I suspect he may be a visual thinker. That's him right there.
Well, kids that like maps usually are visual thinkers.
Yeah. So if he's, given that he's a visual thinker, what should we emphasize when we work with him and
How
play
old
with
is
him?
your son?
He's 6 years old.
Verbal?
Yes. Yeah, moderately.
Well, sometimes in some of the kids that are moderately verbal, I try to look at what kind of language problems we got. It's basically kind of 3 kinds of language problems. Mine is getting it out is a big problem. And I have some receptive problems. People talk too fast. It sounded like gibberish. I still have a lot of problems today understanding people with strong accents. I have a lot more trouble with that than most people do. Then you got the echolalic kids, where they're yakking out nice, smooth English or some other language, yakking out TV commercials, but they don't know what they mean. Those are language output circuits working fine, but it's not hooked up to the meaning part of the brain.
Okay.
And some kids, just doing a few one words, some of these kids learn how to type. I'm a big believer in getting a keyboard out and, teach them how to type. Get them on Google, type in, keywords. You got to be careful Google doesn't do something in a pen. Supervised activity. But but there's kids who's a poor language and actually have decent language typing. And the way I kind of look at it, we try to do in America is get a hold of the 2-year-olds. Really, really good early intervention. And see if we can get them ready for normal kindergarten at age 5. This is one thing where you guys here in the UK are behind us. We've got a lot more emphasis on early intervention. But then there's some kids where you get some language, but then you might be a really good typer. And you just start out, typing nouns, typing requests. Just let them hunt and peck with one finger. Don't try to teach touch typing. Forget it. That's not going to work. But there are kids that are nonverbal that actually look really low functioning. They can type one. There's a kid named Tito Macapane. And he has a book called How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move? You can buy it on Amazon US. He types independently. And I know he types for real. He's not cute. Mom doesn't have her hand on him. And he types really fast, a sentence, and then he jumps up and he flaps around. And he can do about 3 questions, and then he's got to rest. And I asked him one time, what was it like before you got typing? And he said, emptiness. And so I'm a big believer in keywords. And if you don't get the speech coming in. then they can start learning how to, some of them learn to type, some of them can't. See, the thing, what tends to happen in the brain is like, the brain's kind of like an office building. And it's got different departments. And the CEO's office or the president's office up in the top, that tends to have really poor wiring. Division vice presidents don't get very good wiring. But some of the specialty offices are wonderful. So it's sort of like we have an office block, and the whole place is a mess, but you got one or two offices in there that are working. And you can hook into those one or two offices. Sometimes you find that there's a normal brain hidden in it. Like Tito, he has a hard time naming items. Like if you show him a picture of a flower, you might say the colored part of the plant is called the flower. Kind of comes in the back door. But I think you find how can I talk if your lips don't move, really, really informative. You get a real insight into very severe sensory problems. Sensory problems are much more severe than what I have. Sensory scrambling is visual systems breaking up. You see, in your visual system, you have circuits with color, shape, and motion. The whole back third of the brain. Those have got to work together to form images. That's called the binding problem in vision research. Nobody knows how that works. But something's wrong with it. Because Tito might look at a blue door, and he sees a blue blob, and then he sees the outline of the door. In other words, those color, shape, and motion circuits are not working together. There's something wrong with it. And he's an auditory. Auditory is his best sense. But I mean, especially since you're working with some of the more severe kids, that has a book that definitely belongs in your library. If he has an earlier book, The Mind Tree, I wouldn't get that. Because you might want to read his poetry, but that doesn't give insight into Tito's mind. Where, how can I talk if my lips don't move? That's the book that really will give you insight. Wonderful. Okay.
Well, I'm just interested about the kind of sensory issues you experienced when you were younger. Do they still have an impact on you?
Well, I've been taking antidepressants for 30 years, and that really calms things down. And where antidepressants can really work, like a little bit of Prozac or fluoxetine, is for anxiety and panic attacks. A little dab of Prozac can really work wonders, but you've got to use tiny doses, often much lower than what normal people would take. Because you take too much Prozac, you're going to get agitation and insomnia. And in my book, Thinking in Pictures, also The Way I See It, you've got The Way I See It, second edition. It's got to be the second edition. Explain all that stuff in detail. In America, we've got some really awful stuff going on with medications, antipsychotics being given out like candy to 5-year-olds, and you're getting tardive dyskinesia, nerve damage. You're giving out these drugs like the sleep aids. That's like stupid. That's like using a tank to drive down to the corner store and you wreck the road in the process. Okay?
That's very helpful. I wondered if there was any teachers in your life as you were growing up who were particularly inspiring.
Oh, yes. My science teacher in high school. When I was getting teased in high school, my science teacher, he was Mr. Carlock, and he got an honorary doctorate. The movie was shown beautifully in the movie. He was a NASA space scientist. He got me interested in studying. I mean, if I wanted to become a scientist, then I had to study. And he was a crucial mentor, and he's shown absolutely beautifully in the movie.
Were there particular approaches that he had?
Well, he got, in science class, a movie was shown about optical illusions. In the movie, they show a video clip of they show the old 16mm film showing the optical illusion documentary that I saw when I was in high school. And I got fascinated with this distorted optical illusion room. And my teacher said to me, I want you to figure out how to build it. He didn't tell me how to build it. He made me figure it out. And in the movie, they built it in the movie exactly the way I actually ended up making it. Those are the kind of good teachers that can really make a difference. Also, when I was getting teased, where I was saved was the activities where I had a shared interest. Horseback riding, or electronics lab, or the science lab. The students that were interested in those things were not doing the teasing. Those activities just saved me. How about the green sweater back there? Jumper there is a version.
By your film and how
of problems in the rest of the world. But you got to just work on one thing at a time. And, you know, roll one built a day. I've always liked projects that are well defined. And if you want to read about some of my livestock work, I have a website, Grandin.com. It's strictly my livestock work. And then I have my 2 animal books, Animals in Translation, Animals Made as Human, which here in the UK they call Making Animals Happy. I don't know why they changed the title. It's the same book as Animals Made as Human. But what my teachers did is they took my fixation and they helped develop it into a career. You know, if a kid likes airplanes, don't stamp that out. Use an airplane to teach reading. A lot of kids just love trains. You've got lots of trains around here. Well, use a train to teach reading. Use a train to teach math. Take those fixations and broaden them out. Use that motivation of that fixation. Okay?
In the documentary about you, I think you suggested that you were slightly dubious about behaviorism. Do you have any thoughts about the different kinds of...
I don't get in all the fights about the different kinds of therapists. There's a thing that I have found. I've watched good teachers at work. ABA starts to look like Denver Start Model. I just went to a seminar on Denver Start Model. Well, I watched an old Lobos video years ago. He was doing the same thing. You see, I'm a visual doctor, so I look at what the teacher's doing. And I'm going to put more emphasis on getting enough hours of one-to-one with effective teachers. You know, teachers got to know how to engage. You also have to be careful about the sensory overload. You get in there too rough with some of these kids, they're just going to go into sensory shutdown. And a lot, ABA has changed a lot. Some of the old-fashioned, rigid ABA, I don't really care for that kind of ABA, where you just sit at a table and that's all you do all day. Most people don't do that anymore. And what that, you know, ABA is very different in different places. And I just don't even want to get in those hassles. The important thing is good teachers, you know, that get the kid engaged, you're getting speech, you're getting engagement. That's the important thing. Now, the one thing that Denver Start does more of than I like is turn taking, because that was something that really helped me. So just in a little bit, I'd like to see some board games and do some turn-taking activities, because a lot of these kids are awful about taking turns, and they need to learn how to do that. The Parcheesi board, I'd go to move the piece before my sister did, and Mother would say, wait for your sister's turn to move it. Or I didn't shake the dice up enough. No, you can't put them in and slide them out. You gotta shake them up.
I'm just wondering, just curiosity, my nephew is 16, is autistic.
Yep.
And one thing that I noticed with him, the animals are particularly interesting.
Some of these autistic kids are magic with animals. Absolutely magic. I've had parents say to me, my child is best buddies with the dog. He and the dog is totally understand, or the horse is totally understand each other. And what, again, this is very, there are some autistic kids where animals, boy, they just hit it off. It's just wonderful. Then you have a child that's kind of afraid of the dog, but then warms up to it and really gets to like it. And then you have the kids that hate dogs. And the reason why they hate them is sensory. Because you never know when a dog's going to bark. So they want to get away from the dog because they're afraid it will go off like a fire alarm going off and hurt their ears.
Well, he's actually afraid of dogs because they bark. But the dogs are, they're very interested in him. I find that even when he's on the street wearing out, dogs seem to follow him. And same with cats.
Well, how about cats? Maybe you get along with cats better
He gets along with cats.
because the cats don't make such a scary noise. See, that's purely sensory. And the problem with the dog is I can't control totally its bark. Even the most well-trained dogs sometimes bark. And what you might do with dog barking is get a sound effects recording. But if you do that, you can't use an MP3 file, you know, like an iPod player, because they're not full spectrum. So they're not full spectrum audio. You've got to use full spectrum audio. So if you have some old vinyl records or VHS, you know, old PAL tapes or special electronic full spectrum files, then he can turn that dog barking on and then gradually turn it on more when he's controlling how much dog barking he's going to hear. And or maybe even go the animal shelter and Okay, you walk a little bit into the animal shelter, and if it's too loud, he can leave. But he's controlling the amount of dog bark. And then he may get to love dogs once he gets over the dog bark. I hate balloons pop. Oh, I don't like them. I mean, if I'm driving, nobody's going to be messing with a balloon in the car. Okay, right there.
You designed, was it the speed?
Yeah, when I got into puberty, I started having horrible anxiety and panic attacks. So I watched cattle going in a squeeze chute. That's the thing that holds wild cattle still. They walk in a stall with metal sides pressed in on them. And I watched them put the cattle in this, and I noticed that some of the cattle just kind of relaxed and calmed down. So I went and tried the squeeze chute, and it calmed me down. So then I went and built a similar to a squeeze chute to calm me down. Now, deep pressure is common. You know, there's some kids you get them under some cushions, or maybe slow swinging in a net swing. Then you work on your 80 speed stair. Because you know how when you take a mobile phone outside, it works better? Well, sometimes when you do some of these sensory activities, like maybe getting under the cushions or under the gym mats, that helps sort of stabilize the circuits of the brain in some ways not known. And the signal gets through better.
Do you still use that today?
No, I broke a few years ago. I didn't get around to fixing it. I'm hugging more real people. Okay, right there.
You've achieved a lot in your life. Do you have ambitions that you'd still like to achieve?
Well, I'm still teaching my students. I've had 5 animal behavior PhDs that I've gotten through college. Still keep planning on doing those sorts of things. I'm doing a lot of talks. You know, I've had kids write to me and say the movies motivated them that they can really succeed. That's really a good thing. I'm still doing my livestock stuff. And this trip has been more livestock than it has been autism. Because I think it's really important that I have a real job. I'm really getting concerned about these young Asperger kids, you know, just where autism has become a fixation. Because when I work in a technical field, there's all kinds of undiagnosed people with mild autism out in Silicon Valley, you know, running some of the most important companies in the world. You know, so one geek goes to Silicon Valley, another geek goes to Hollywood, another geek is playing video games on Social Security. That makes me a little crazy. Because sometimes there's not enough expectations for behavior. When I was a young child, there were expectations of getting on time, getting up in the morning, getting dressed, not causing a disturbance in church, sitting at Sunday dinner and behaving. Now, Mother realized that she couldn't put me into sensory environments I just couldn't tolerate. But most of the places where this behavior was expected were not noisy. My grandmother's house was not noisy. Okay?
Yeah. I think that celebrity and being famous and having everybody's adulation is tough on just anybody. And how do you deal with it? Because autistic people don't like human contact. You're
well,
a
I
teacher.
consider it a responsibility. You know, you're always on display all the time, getting recognized in the airport. And I kind of almost approach it like a job. It's a responsibility. You know, I've got to make sure I behave myself. Okay?
A lot of what you say sounds applicable to most people. I mean, everybody should learn that.
Well, the thing is,
do you think it is?
See, the problem is that today's kind of looser society, and maybe this has gotten worse in the States than it has here, where you're not, you know, rigidly taught social skills. I think it hurts the autistic kids more than it hurts the normal kids.
But do you think for the normal kids that what you've been describing is helpful methods for the autistic children?
Well, yeah, absolutely,
really
because I mean, as normal kids, I'm appalled when I go to these meetings, the number of kids that don't know how to shake hands. You know, autistic kids, you just got to show them how hard to squeeze. No, you don't rip their arm off. No, you don't hand them a dead fish. You've got to demonstrate to them I don't tell them, I demonstrate. Okay, now I'm going to get up. Okay, I'm going to squeeze like this. Okay, now you squeeze me back, just that amount of pressure. Okay, now. And then he does it too hard. And I say, okay, now you just, then you just shove them. That's how I was taught. But I'm just appalled with the number of kids that, real high-functioning kids, have been taught to shake hands. They go to take a picture, they grab me in a really inappropriate, hard, in a really inappropriate manner, because nobody's shown them, what's appropriate. They just got to be shown. They got to learn all their social stuff like being in a play. And the only way to learn these things is out in the real environment. Okay, we're having a meal and I'm eating mashed potatoes with my hands. Well, let's say use a fork. Okay?
You talked about a couple of times about teasing that you had.
No, it's terrible. Teenage years, worst part of my life.
And also the importance of the sort of turn-taking and the fact that the ones who didn't tease were the ones who had a shared interest.
That's right. And those were refuges away from teasing.
Yeah. So my question is, at what age do you think it's appropriate to start to talk to all children about autism in order to increase their awareness of it and to change attitudes?
Probably 3rd or 4th grade. One of the things that was done, that would be like 7, 8 years old. I think your grades are the same here. When I was in grade school, when I wasn't there, the teacher would explain to the other kids that, if you're in a wheelchair, obviously you can see what the handicap is. Back in the 50s, the light was at polio, so it is at braces on the legs. Okay, then you know what a handicap is. An autistic kid has a handicap that is not visible the same way a wheelchair would be. And elementary school actually went fairly, I had some problems, but that was a walk in the park compared to high school. Because kids teased me, I reacted by fighting. I got kicked out of 9th grade when I was 14 for throwing a book. And ended up going to a special boarding school. And and after I got horseback riding taken away for 2 weeks, I switched from anger to crying. I couldn't control emotion, so I switched emotion. And I've had parents say, well, I've got a boy who's really good at computer programming and he cries. I get good. Crybaby geeks can get good jobs to keep. And I have a slide that I normally show my PowerPoint presentation, and it shows a space shuttle. The caption is, it's okay for geeks to cry. Because I saw a 65-year-old NASA space scientist cry at a high school career day. Because he talked about being an aerospace engineer, because the shuttle's being canceled. And he was crying by the end of that talk. I get choked up about this. He was showing beautiful pictures of the space shuttle with just an automatic showing behind him. And, if he hadn't learned how to cry, he wouldn't have had that job. Because if you're throwing things, you're not going to learn from NASA. It's that simple. Or any other kind of company. And that's what I did. I switched to crying. Sometimes I get the giggles really, really loud. One time I was on a plane and they had a movie, it's called The Freshman. And they had a big lizard in an elevator in a fancy hotel, a glass elevator. And I got to laughing so hard that the whole plane turning around. Okay, it was right here. Somebody had to find it right there. Okay, right there.
You spoke about the very explicit teaching.
Yeah.
You must have been taught hundreds of those things, but once you've been taught them or once you've written them, is it something you find you always have to think about?
No, I don't have to think about it. They were just pounded in. You say please, say thank you, or you don't push in line. Go in the store, and if I touch something I wasn't going to buy, I was just going to touch merchandise. If you're going to buy it, run behind the counter. Even now, like if I go behind the counter, I'm still, seeing Woolworths and down in Massachusetts, where I was told not to go behind the counter, only the clerks can go behind the counter. It was all done by specific example, out in the real environment. If I ran behind the counter, I was told I couldn't run behind the counter. If I was handling merchandise I wasn't going to buy, I was told not to handle it. We'd go in a store, we'd try clothes on, we had to be very careful. And we only tried on things when we really were going to buy stuff. And I'd have to maybe try 2 or 3 different sizes. But you always ended up buying stuff. You didn't just go in the store and try stuff on just to try it on. you gotta buy stuff.
The much more subtle session key that you mentioned, you were learning some.
Well, I've had problems with that, and this is the sort of thing where videos would really be helpful. Where you watch videos, or, you know, and also books, you see, there were none of the books existed when I was a kid. You know, now there's books I can read that are, you know, totally helpful. Okay?
You talk every now and then saying that you just have to imagine you're in play and you know, social skills. Would you actually recommend, you know, maybe teaching drama skills or maybe?
Well, I think that, you know, some people on the spectrum are really good acting in plays. There are some of the verbal people, kind of Asperger's, they're really good at it. It's stage acting. That's actually good because they have to learn how to act in a play. But you got to practice these things. You got to take them out to restaurants and they got to practice, you know, ordering food. If you're on a low budget, well, then you just get a coffee, or you just get a little drink or something. You just go in and buy one little thing in the store just to get the practice of the interaction. You got to go up to the train station and buy the tickets. You just got to learn that stuff by doing. Now, when mistakes are made, the parent or the teacher shouldn't be screaming no. You just walk up. Let's say I ran through the window at the train station. They'd like, get the ticket. Mother would say, wait for the man to pass you the ticket. You just give the instruction. You don't scream no. That confuses kids. You just give the instruction. You wait for the man to give you the ticket. Say it calm.
One thing I'm wondering is the terms kind of high functioning and low functioning autism are used quite a bit in this field. As a person with autism, do you think, are they acceptable words to use, or is that kind of...
Well, you could call it verbal and there's definitely nonverbal autism. And then there's some people that are nonverbal, like Tita, who looks very handicapped. There's no way he could live independently. He can't control his movement. That actually has a normal mind. And then you've got the really smart people who are like running Silicon Valley. Autism is a very big continuum. One of the things that's very difficult is at one end of the continuum, no matter how hard you try to get somebody who's going to have to be living in some kind of supervised situation, but if they get all the right training, they could do maybe a cooking job. And then you've got other people that need to be working as engineers somewhere. And one of the mistakes being made at home that I don't like is they're taking people that ought to be engineers and training them to be janitors. That's, if you want opposition to defiant behavior, that's what we try to get. Okay, right there.
So you're talking about oppositional defiance disorder. And
I think it's a bunch of BS.
Because I encountered a young child with autism who was also, diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder because of his behaviour. Are you saying that you just need to teach him to change behaviour?
Well, one of the things that makes him oppositional, if you want to make an 8-year-old oppositional defiant, if a kid needs to be 3 grades ahead in math and you make him do baby math drills over and over again, I guarantee he's going to end up oppositional defiant. One of the things we need to do with these kids is challenge. To get them challenged to do something they're interested in. You see, that's where a good teacher, like a science teacher, really makes a difference. Yeah.
My son he loves trains. So
okay. Lots of them like trains.
But he watches videos of trains just coming to the station, opening the doors, people getting off.
That's the more rapid motion. He likes the rapid motion. That's why he watches that.
But he does it on, and I just look at it as I do something else. Should I just,
well,
is there no harm done in letting him, or?
I wouldn't let him watch videos of trains for 8 hours a day. No. I was allowed to have an hour after lunch where I could spin a brass plate to cover up a bolt on the bed. And I would just spin this brass plate. Okay, now more modern, let's say with videos of trains. Mother would have let me look at that for an hour a day, but then the rest of the time we're not going to do that. So he needs to have, he can have some downtime where he can do his thing he really likes to do. He shouldn't do it all day. You can have some designated times when you watch train videos. And then there's the problem where they don't want to stop on these things. Well, maybe get a timer so he then knows how much time he's got left.
Do you have any tips on anxiety or social anxiety?
Well, this is where if I hadn't gone on medication, I would have really been in trouble. Medication, when it's done right, can really sometimes really make a big difference. Things like Prozac, the antidepressants, often are very good in very low doses for anxiety. Because a brain scan was done on me showed that my amygdala, my fear center, is like 3 times bigger than normal.
One problem for autistic kids is change and unpredictability. Do you have any advice? Expose them to a bit more change or establish...
Well, the thing with the change is try not to have surprises. If you're going to be going to a new place, maybe show them some pictures of it beforehand. Tell them beforehand, so it's not a total surprise. Now, sometimes you get, something goes wrong, like the train yesterday, was hung up and late. Well, sometimes that happens. Well, then you just sit on the train. You don't try to get off the train. You got to just sit on the train and wait for the conductor to tell you what to do. So you can get contingencies of what you might do in different situations.
I think we've got time for one more question.
Okay, one more question right there.
You obviously in this game of choosing surprise like you were talking about and going to stay with the last day in these towns was something that you love. And how do you have any advice on how to sort of take children down and find what they're passionate about? Sometimes they don't get the opportunity to, if they potentially be great at something, to have the opportunity to try that out.
Well, give me an example.
Like say for example, a child was going to be amazing at music, but they didn't have the opportunity to.
Well, he needs to, if he's musically gifted or really good at music, he needs to be given opportunities to do music. There's no way he could use this area of strength that didn't have the access to instruments.
It is something as different as what you were interested in.
Well, I got really interested in cattle squeeze chutes. That was kind of weird. And one of the things the science teacher did is he says you want to figure out why that relaxes you, then you got to learn how to read scientific literature. Now, back in the 60s, that was hard. No copying machines. You had to get all the journals out of these big books. So I'd get the journal abstracts and then I'd write an abstract down on recipe cards and put them in a recipe box. That's how you did lit searches, literature searches in the 60s. That was hard work. I can remember when we got the first copies, in the early 70s. That was like just but that motivated me to learn how to read scientific literature. You see, he says, you want to find out why that works? And then you're going to need to read all the scientific stuff and take classes in physiology and get a degree. You got to become a scientist to figure out why the squeeze machine relaxed you. See, that was using the motivation of that fixation, tapping into it to do a lot of other things. See, the mistake that's often made is try to stomp out the motivations rather than broadening them. And you tapping into that motivation in an associative manner. See, our mind's associative. When I was a little kid, all I wanted to draw all the time was horse heads. Well, Mother said, well, maybe draw with a ride the horse too. Draw a picture of the stable. And she got me to do a picture of a beach. Because I got to learn how to use my abilities to do work that other people want. Okay, maybe one more quick one.
It's just what it was saying about the schedule. Is it possible to, how can you teach, or is it possible to teach an autistic child the word maybe?
Well, sometimes things are maybe, okay, because it may rain tomorrow. Maybe let's start out with the weather. Okay, so we look at the weather reports. And sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're not. Because they just can't, even with satellites, they still just can't predict the weather absolutely accurately. That might be a good place to start. To sort of the concept of maybe. Like sometimes the forecast is, it's definitely going to be sunny tomorrow and it will be. But then they might say, You know, 60% chance of rain. Okay, that's a maybe. Let's start with some kind of example like that.
We all know we're ambitious here. We fulfilled one of our greatest ambitions in having Temple Grandin coming to visit us. And in the forward to this book, Dr. Bruce Sullivan said that Temple had no one had a bigger impact on global understanding of autism and Asperger's syndrome. And I think we'd all agree with that here today. And I think we'll all remember this day for a long time. And it's something that we share with all of our colleagues. And we hope that we'll be able to keep in touch over the years and let you know how our young people will progress into real life in the community. Maybe making brownies for a shop somewhere.
All of that's a real activity or extremely good brownies too. That brings up another thing, is that the thing that they made is something really good that other people want. You see, that's the basis of job skills. They were really good brownies. People will like it.
So these things can keep huge here today, and talking to all of our people on talk about autism. If you go on there is a whole stream of questions and answers. We had loads and loads of questions answered. We couldn't answer all of them, but it was amazing, and the insight just in that 1 hour was amazing.